So, you have finally finished building your beautiful web application. It looks great, it's packed with features, and you are proud of it. But then you run a speed test, and the results, well, let's just say they are not exactly what you were hoping for. The site is slow, sluggish, and it takes forever to load. But what if you could turn it into a performance masterpiece in just a few simple steps? Well, that's exactly what we are going to do today. I will show you 7 common bottlenecks and how to easily fix them to make your Next.js website 10 times faster. So, without any further ado, let's go! Alright, so welcome to this slow website. This website is designed to be slow, but don't worry, we will make it fast together. Boom! So right here, this website has 3 pages, 3 routes. First of all, the homepage, that's what you see right here. Then I created a block route, and as you already see, the navigation is kinda sluggish, right? We have some sort of delay, and also there's some sort of blocking event. And then I also created this dashboard page, and the navigation is quick, that's good. But still, I made a few mistakes right here. I created a few problems, which makes the whole experience a bit subpar. It could be way better. But let's start with the homepage, with the OG. So what's the problem right here? I mean, it's fast, right? If I do a hard refresh, I get my data, my page. Well, let's look at the code base. So this is the code base, as you see right here. We have an export default function. I return all of the divs and h1s and stuff like that. And in general, I don't see anything that's incorrect. I mean, it looks quite good, right? Please review the code. Is there anything that's incorrect? No, the code is fine. But right here I marked the component with the use client directive. And this is kinda a big mistake. So here's the thing. If we go back to the documentation, it will say right here that a standard React application ships JavaScript to the client, to the browser, and also we have a process which is called hydration. Now, if you use React server components, our application gets faster because it does not ship any JavaScript to the client anymore, to the browser, and also it skips hydration. This whole page now gets a JavaScript bundle, and also this whole page has to hydrate on the client side, right? But if I delete the use client directive and again go back, everything will still work, but my application, this page, just got 2 times faster. Okay, maybe not 2 times faster, but now I don't ship any JavaScript to the client anymore, and also this whole page does not hydrate anymore because React server components skip this whole hydration step. You want to, at the end of the day, use React server components as much as possible, and whenever you need interactivity, whenever you need the use state hook or anything like that, then create a separate component and mark it with the use client directive. But I like to leave my main pages as standard server components, and then I create separate smaller client components where I then get a JavaScript bundle and then where this whole component also hydrates. So this landing page is finished, it's now fast, and we can continue with the block route. If I go to the home page and click on block, and as you see, it takes about a second until I get navigated to this route. So there's some sort of blocking event. Let's maybe analyze the route. So right here I have the block folder, and then I have a standard page.tsx. So inside of here I first of all fetch data, and then I return my UI, then I map over the data, and I render the block card component. The block card component is a server component. I did not mark it with the use client directive, and right here I just return a card with all of the data. So this itself looks fine. If we again go back and do a hard refresh, we don't have any client components. Everything is on the server side, everything runs on the server side. There's no hydration and there's no JavaScript bundle which is shipped to the client. So what's the problem? Why is this application so slow? good question. How about we open the inspector and look at the network tab? So if I do a hard refresh, we first of all get our document right here. And then as you see right here, wow, this image is kinda big, right? I mean, it loads quite slowly. What's the problem? So if we look at the network tab, at the network waterfall, then we first of all get our document. This is the HTML. Then we fetch our font, we fetch our CSS, and then we fetch the image itself. But this image is huge.
That's what she said.
5,000 kilobytes, that's like 5 megabytes. So this is kinda a big problem. Well, solution number one would be to make the image in general smaller. This is a good solution, but there's an even better and easier solution. And that's to use the Next.js image component. So instead of using this image tag, I will get the image component from next/image. And if we again go back, then you will see that we get an error right here. But before we fix this error, first of all, what even is the image component and why should you use it? Well, the Next.js image component actually extends the standard image element, but it provides a few key benefits, like for example, size optimization, visual stability, faster page loads, and asset flexibility. So it's a very big win. As you see, these are a lot of benefits and you get them right out of the box when you use Next.js. But as you see right here, we get an error and it says missing required width property. Why do we have to provide a width property for this image component? Well, this is a good question. It says right here, the width and height properties are used to infer the correct aspect ratio of the image and to avoid layout shift from the image loading in. So that's the reason why we have to add them. So if we go back, we can add a width right here, which will be 500, and then also a height, which will be 500. Nevertheless, we still get an error, and that's because we have to also define the host name in our next.config file, because Next.js will now optimize this image, and this has a certain cost, a resource cost. And to protect yourself against attackers, because you don't want to allow anybody to optimize their images, right? You want to only optimize your own images. And that's why you want to open the next.config file and define the route, the host name inside of here. And if we again open the inspector and do a hard refresh, you will see something very interesting. First of all, the image load was super quick, like boom, instant. We did not wait 10 seconds. Again, if I do a hard refresh, we instantly get the image. It maybe has a delay of 1 second. And if we look at the image in general, it has a smaller size. 31 kilobytes. A few moments ago, our image had a size which was 5,000 kilobytes, and now it's only 30 kilobytes, and 5,000 divided by 30 is 166. So our image is now 166 times smaller. Wow. So as you see, the image component is a huge win and it's super easy to use. So now we fixed another problem, but if I do a hard refresh, it's still a bit sluggish. What's the problem? Well, again, if we go back to the block cut, we fixed our image and right here we have an H3 and then we have this P tag. And as you see right here, I format the created at timestamp. And to do that, I use moment, and moment is like a library to format your dates. It's a quite nice library, but it has one huge problem. If I go to Bundlephobia and right here search for moment, then you will see something interesting. It has a minified and gzipped bundle size, which is 73 kilobytes. This is quite big, and this makes our application slower. Because here's the thing, I will deploy this application later on to Vercel. Vercel is a serverless provider, so your application will be deployed on a serverless function. And the thing is, a serverless function is the most performant if your bundle size is small. So instead of using moment, how about I just use the native JavaScript API, right? So I can just comment this out and instead I will use the international API provided by JavaScript. So right here, as you see, new international datetime format. If I save this and again go back, nothing changes. But I now literally saved myself 70 kilobytes in my whole application bundle size. Now this might seem like a simple fix, right? But here's the thing. Whenever I use AI, yes, I sometimes use AI to code, it sometimes installs moment or date FNS to format very simple dates. And this is not needed. So please make sure that you delete these imports, that you delete these libraries for these simple formats. Instead, use the international API. It's super powerful and also it saves 73 kilobytes. Our application is now already a bit faster. Nevertheless, there's still one big problem. If I go to the homepage and again navigate to block, we have this blocking event. 1 second. Why is that? Well, again, if I go back, I fetch data, get block posts. And right here, I created a delay. This means I have to wait for 1 second until I get all of this data. This isn't optimal because this navbar is static, right? I don't fetch any data inside of here. It loads instantly. But this data has a 1 second delay. And because of this 1 second delay, this whole page, including the navbar, has to now wait for 1 second. This is not optimal. Is there any way to fix this? Good question. And yes, there's a very easy solution. And the solution is called streaming. Now, no, it's not streaming like TikTok or Twitch or something like that, but instead you want to stream your data. So streaming allows the server to send parts of a dynamic route to the client as soon as they are ready, rather than waiting for the entire route to be rendered. So what we want to do is render the navbar instantly. This should render instantly. This H1 and description should also load instantly, but these block cards should come into view as they finish loading. So that's what you call streaming. And implementing streaming in Next.js is actually quite easy because Next.js has been designed to be used with streaming. So first of all, we want to create a new function, and this will be an async function. Inside of here, I want to await the function, so this function in which I fetch my data, and then I will again just map over these block articles and then render a block or the block card component. Instead of rendering this div, I will just paste the function component, which I just created, and then I can also delete this constant and also remove this async modifier. And if I go back and do a hard refresh, nothing changes. The application is still slow. We still have this blocking event, and that's because we don't suspend the data loading. So to suspend it, we can wrap this component in ace or in suspense boundaries. These are imported from React, and we can also add a fallback. And this fallback is what will be displayed when our data suspends. And once the data has finished loading, it will swap this fallback for the real data. And if I now go to the home page and again go back to the block, we get an instant navigation. Again, this top section is rendered instantly. This data loading is suspended. We have a fallback, and once the data finally loads, the fallback gets swapped out for this data, for this content. And this creates this super fast website while also showing dynamic data. So now we have finished with basic optimizations, and I want to also look at more advanced examples. So right here on the top I have a navbar with a login and register button. But here's the thing, these two buttons don't work. No, why not? So here's the thing, the problem which I will show you in a second does not deal with authentication, but rather with the user session. What do I mean by that? Well, let's first of all implement authentication, and for that I will use Kind. Kind is the sponsor of this video and my favorite auth solution. They offer everything from authentication to advanced authorization, and they even recently released billing, which means it's now super easy to implement subscriptions into your application. And I will also dive into billing in a video which will come out quite soon, so stay tuned. But for now, I want to pretty much implement authentication as fast as possible. And step number one is to first of all sign in. Once signed in, the next step is to create a business with a business name, kind domain, number of employees, and region. As you see right here, this business has been created and I can also open it. And here I now get an onboarding guide. So I want to use Kind with my existing code base. I use Next.js and I want to integrate Kind with my Next Next.js codebase, and my users are allowed to sign in with email, Google, and then also GitHub. We're now almost finished, and the last step is to connect our Next.js codebase with Kind. So I can click on connect, and right here they provide us with a little quick start guide. So I will quickly implement Kind, you will also do it, and once finished I will come back. So as you see right here, I now implemented Kind, I added all of the environment variables, and also once a user logs in, I will redirect the user to the dashboard route. Let's now open the navbar, and right here I currently have this dummy user, which is set to false. But I want to instead get my user session, and also I want to allow the user to actually log in. Let's first of all fix the second problem, which is to redirect the user to log in, and for that we can use the login link and register link components, which can be used to start the auth flow. If I again go back, I can scroll to the bottom, and these two components are headless. So instead of using this button, I want to use the login link, and instead of using this register button, I will use the register link. Again, as mentioned, these are headless, so I will use the button variants function to style these two components. If I again go back and do a hard refresh, nothing changes. But if I click on register, I will get redirected to this hosted authentication page. Users can now sign in with either Google, GitHub, or with their email. I will continue with Google, and as you see right here, I got authenticated, or in other words, I got redirected back to the dashboard, and as you also see, I have a valid user session. If I go back to the index page, my navbar did not get updated. That's a huge problem. This means I want to get the user session right here in the navbar. So how do you get the user session with Kind in this navbar? Well, this navbar is the server component, which means we can fetch data inside of here, right? Yeah, that's correct. So let's fetch the user session right here. To get the user session with Kind, I will just say constant. I can then destructure it, and this will be equal to the get Kind server session hook. And this get Kind server session hook exposes functions which only run on the server side. I want to get the get user function. This is a promise which I have to await. And now in theory, if I again go back, I now get my user dropdown. And that's because if I scroll to the bottom, right here I have a ternary. If I have a valid user session, or if we have a valid user session, then I render the user dropdown. If there's no valid user session, then I render these two buttons. So what's exactly the problem right here? Well, how do we get our user session? Well, again, we use the get Kind server session hook, and this get Kind server session hook exposes functions which run on the server side. But wait, this is a server component. This is correct, right? You want to fetch data in a server component. Yes, that's correct, but not in a layout. What do I mean by that? Well, where's this navbar rendered? Well, this navbar is rendered in the layout. So right here I have the main folder with a layout file, and here I render my navbar, and then underneath the navbar I have all of the children. And the thing is, whenever you fetch data in a layout on the server side, all of the children get opted into dynamic rendering. What do I mean by that? Well, here's the thing. Let's go back to the home page. Do I fetch any data inside of here? No, this page does not fetch any data. This is like a static route, right? I only return a few elements, an image, and this button. That's it. There's no data fetching. And this also means that in theory, this page should be rendered statically, right? No, it doesn't. You know what? To verify it, I can just open my terminal and I will run pnpm run build. This will just create a local production build of our application, and it will also show us which routes are statically rendered and which routes are rendered dynamically. And here you will see something interesting. The index page is rendered dynamically. So here they have this little table. So this F stands for dynamic, server rendered on demand. This circle stands for pre-rendered as static content. And this index page is rendered on demand, server rendered on demand. The not found route is static. That's good. That's nice. But this index page, it should be static, but it's not static. And that's because, again, this navbar fetches data on the server side. The navbar is rendered in the layout, which means in theory, you fetch data in the layout on the server side. And whenever you do that, all of your children get automatically opted into dynamic rendering, even if they could be rendered statically, so pre-rendered. And what do I really mean with this static rendering? Well, Next.js is quite smart. When you fetch data, your whole page is opted into dynamic rendering. When it sees that you don't fetch any data, it pre-renders the page at build time, and then it's served from a CDN. And this CDN, as you all know, is distributed globally in the US, in Germany, wherever, which means your application is quite fast. I mean, let me show it to you. This is my website, marshallcode.com, and this index page is rendered statically. This means if I do a hard refresh, I get a response instantly. This ultimate Next.js course route is rendered statically. I get an instant response. The free tutorials route is rendered instantly. I mean, it's static. This tutorial route is not rendered statically. This is rendered on demand. And that's why I also right here have this suspense boundary with a fallback. So as you see, Next.js is powerful. It can make your website quite fast. But if you fetch data in a layout, it breaks this dynamic or this static rendering. So how can we fix this stupid problem? Good question. How do I do it in my website? Well, if I do a hard refresh, you will see right here in the navbar on the top right corner, there's like a small delay. So if I do a hard refresh, it takes like 1 second to get the user session. And that's because I fetched the user session on the client side. And that's also what we want to do right here for this slow website. If we again go back to the navbar, I can first of all mark this component with the use client directive, and then instead of using the get kind server session hook, I want to get the use kind browser client. And this exposes the get user function, and if I again go back and do a hard refresh, we get this little flash. And that's because for a millisecond while kind fetches the user session, it of course returns null. The user does not have any user session. I'm currently fetching the user session. You can also get the is loading boolean right here from this hook, and then you can create another ternary. So right here I now updated the ternary. If is loading is true, I will just return nothing, null, and if we have a valid user session, then this, and if not, then these two buttons. If I again go back and do a hard refresh, you see right here we now don't have this flash anymore because it returns null, and once we get the user session, it displays right here this user dropdown. And if I again build the application with pnpm run build, then you will see something interesting. As you see right here, the index page is now rendered or pre-rendered as static content. The block route is pre-rendered as static content. This dashboard is dynamic, but that's because I fetch data inside of there. The route handler is rendered dynamically. That's because a route handler, an API route, should never be pre-rendered as static content. But as you see right here, this is a huge optimization which we just made, and this is kinda a game changer because a lot of people fetch the user session on the server side in a layout, and with that they make their website slower than it has to be. If you fetch data, sure, the page should be dynamic. If you don't fetch any data in a specific page, then it should also be pre-rendered as static content. And now let's continue with the dashboard. So right here for the dashboard, I want to also make sure that the user has a valid user session. So if a user does not have any valid user session, then the user should just get redirected back to the login route. So how did I implement it right here? Well, it's quite simple. In my Explorer, I have the dashboard folder, and inside of here, I have a layout again. And in the layout, I call this require user function. The require user function is stored in my data access layer. Now, if you don't know what the data access layer is, then I will pop up a video right now on the screen. But in short, it's like a separate location for all of your data logic. So for all of your data access. In my app folder, I have a data folder, then a user folder, and then inside of here, I have a require user function. And in this function, I get the user session. If there's no user session, I redirect the user. But if I get a user session, then I just return the user. And now in the layout, I call this function, which means again, I check the user session on the server side. But we just learned that this is a huge mistake because now all of the children are also rendered on demand on the server side. So how can we fix this right here? I mean, I can't really fetch the user session on the client side because I have to make sure that all of these routes are still secured. Well, the answer is quite simple on how to fix this problem. You want to use middleware. So middleware is there to run code on the server before a request is completed. And then based on the incoming request, you can modify the response by rewriting, redirecting, modifying the request, or response headers, or responding directly. So whenever you get a request which tries to hit your server, this middleware will intercept the request. So this is your server, this is middleware. It will pretty much intercept this request, right? And then it will check if the user has a valid user session. If not, it will then redirect the user. And with that, we don't have to fetch the user session anymore right here in the layout. So I can right now, first of all, delete this await require user. I want to delete this import statement, and instead I can go back to the kind documentation, and here they have an example on how to implement middleware with kind in Next.js. So I will copy this code example, then I want to open my Explorer, and in the root directory, you want to create a middleware.ts file. And right here, this example uses the public paths property, and this is an array, and in this array, you define all of the routes which should not be protected. In this case, the index page is a public route which should not be protected. So if I again go back and do a hard refresh, nothing changes. If I copy this URL and open it in a new incognito tab, I will get redirected to the hosted kind authentication page. And the nice thing is that middleware still preserves static rendering. So for example, right here I fetch data, which means this will be a dynamic route. But if I wouldn't fetch any data inside of here, it would still preserve the static rendering. And now there's only one more problem, but actually a kinda major problem. So here's the thing, I fetch data right here. This is a live example. I fetch real data inside of here, and I fetch quite a few things. So I fetch the total revenue right here. I fetch my customers. I fetch the active accounts, and I fetch the data for the growth rate. Then I also fetch data for the total visitors. And I also fetch the user session right here on the bottom left corner. Now, what's interesting right here? Well, if you go to the data access layer, so again, if I go to the data folder and for example to the get dashboard metrics file, you will see that right here I have all of my functions where I fetch my data, and in every function I call this require user function. Again, that's because I use the data access layer and I want to make sure that all of my data is safe. So that's why I fetch the user session in this function itself where I get my data. I want to make sure that the user has a valid user session. But what is the problem right here? Well, this now means that I fetch the user session 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. I fetch the user session 6 times, even though 1 time would already be enough. After 1 request, I will already know if the user has a valid user session or not. So I don't have to fetch the user session 6 times in 1 render pass. So is there any way to cache the result of the user session for 1 render pass? And also, what do I mean by 1 render pass? So if I do a hard refresh, this is 1 render pass. All of this data renders once, right? In 1 render pass. If I navigate to the index page, this is a new render pass, this whole page. And I want to cache the result of this verify user function or require user function for this 1 render pass. And actually implementing something like that is not hard, it's very easy. And that's because React actually offers a function which allows you to cache the result of a data fetch or computation for 1 render pass. So we can go back to the require user function. Again, this function is used 6 times in this dashboard index page. And then inside of here, I can import cache. And then I want to wrap this whole function in this cache function. So export constant require user, and this is equal to cache. And this cache function creates a new async arrow function. This means if I again go back and do a hard refresh, it it will now fetch the user session one time and it will cache the result for the other 5 requests. So this cache function is very handy if you reuse a function call or when you call a function in multiple places in one route. And in this case, this require user function is called 6 times, which means it makes a lot of sense to cache the result for one render pass. And yes, that's now already it. We are now finished with this video. I hope you could learn a lot. Our website is now 10 times faster. Okay, maybe not 10 times faster, but at least 2 times faster. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It would mean a lot to me and my big heart, so please do it. And now enjoy your day, and I hope I can see you in the next video. Enjoy your day and bye.